Okay, major update on the Kurds situation. Yesterday, I made a video talking about what's going on with the Kurds in northwest Iran or just over the border in Iraq. And there's been some developments. Last night, it was reported that there was actually a ground invasion of Kurdish forces coming across the border from Iraq to Iran. There seems to be some conflicting reporting, but let's give an update because this could be a game changer in the course of this war. So right here in the New York Post, we have this story, why Kurds could be the biggest threat to the mullahs as fighters launch ground offensive against Iran. Now, that title of this article was probably not written by the person who wrote the article. It looks like kind of clickbait because it doesn't really talk about how they're the greatest threat to the mullahs in Iran. Thousands of Kurdish fighters launched a ground offensive inside Iran on Wednesday, following claims that Israel and the U.S. were hoping that the armed ethnic minority group could help overthrow the regime. Okay, and they're operating on the Iraq-Iran border. It remains unclear whether the well-trained Kurdish militias in the self-governed region of Iraqi Kurdistan will get involved. Okay, so let me explain this. There are Kurds in Iraq, and they have a self-governing area. They have a region that is autonomous Kurdish region in Iraq. And then you have the Iranian Kurdish groups, okay? And many of them are based in Iraq. They're kind of like in exile. They're just over the border. And those are the guys who want to take down the Iranian regime. And when we talked about this, that the week before the war, about 5 days before the war broke out, 5 of these Iranian Kurdish groups based in Iraq all unified in their, that, they're all going to come together and they're all going to work together to bring down the Iranian regime. Okay, now you might be wondering why there's 5 different Iranian Kurdish groups, but that's part of the issue we're going to discuss a little later in this video. But just to understand the difference, the Iraqi Kurds and the Iranian Kurds don't necessarily get along. You'd think that they'd be working for the same goals, but they're not, because the Iraqi Kurds have their own autonomous area. They want things to be kept quiet. These are the Kurds in Iraq who got their autonomy after the fall of the Saddam Hussein regime. They fought alongside the Americans against Saddam. They also fought against ISIS, and they have a kind of self-governing area in Iraq, okay? So that's why it says here, it remains unclear whether the well-trained Kurdish militias in the self-governed region of Iraqi Kurdistan will get involved. Okay, some U.S. intel reports suggested that Iraqi Kurds were also involved in the operation, meaning this ground invasion. Although Aziz Ahmad, the top official in the Kurdish region of Iraq, denied that Kurdish fighters had crossed. Okay, so he's saying, no, we weren't involved in this. Oh, let me make this bigger for you. They said, no, we weren't involved in this. We have nothing to do with it. Okay, that's basically what's happening here. Is one of the leaders of the Iraqi Kurds is saying, no, we had nothing to do with it. Okay. On Wednesday, the president of the Kurdish region of Iraq reportedly talked to Iran's foreign minister, the regime foreign minister in Tehran, and pledged cooperation. But then the Kurdish foray, the Kurdish invasion happened soon after that. Okay. This deployment, meaning this invasion, comes after all 6 of the major political factions representing the Kurds in Iran joined a new coalition on Wednesday aimed at the forming of an autonomous territory within the country, the group's leadership announced. Okay, so before the war, 5 of these Iranian Kurdish groups joined together. They unified, and a 6th one, I don't know how many there are, a 6th one joined them yesterday. So now they're all unified and they're going to take down the regime. And meanwhile, the Iraqi Kurds are saying, we got nothing to do with this. Okay, that's the story here. And it talks about how they've faced a lot of oppression over the years, and they see an opportunity now to get their own autonomy in Iran. That's what they're looking for. It quotes this Kurdish studies expert. The Kurdish groups see what's happening now as an opportunity in Iran to unite and stand for self-determination. The future depends on who comes to lead Iran and how they respond to the demands of the Kurds. We could see a Kurdistan operating within Iran, or you could see the next Yugoslavia, which would mean that the whole country would fall apart. Okay? And it mentions that the Kurds helped fight ISIS, and they fought alongside the Americans. Okay, if the regime is still stable after this, Iran will go after the opposition, and that would be bad for the Kurds. We've already seen that Iran's security forces show that they're willing to fire at Iranians. So this is an expert, John Alterman, a Middle East expert at the Center for International Studies, pointing out that this could go really sideways if the Iranian regime doesn't fall and these Kurds end up getting massacred by the Iranians. And it talks about how they're taking this risk and betting that the Americans will help them get their autonomy or at least not stand in their way. And then we have this Jerusalem Post story reporting on the same incident, on this invasion. And it adds in an interesting point. Look at this. Iran's intelligence ministry said on Thursday, that's today, that it targeted posts of separatist groups. That's really referring to the Kurds. They are separatists, as we just saw. They want to create their own autonomous region in northwest Iran, their own Kurdish area, just like there is in Iraq. Right? It targeted separatist groups who intended to enter through western borders, adding that they sustained heavy losses. The Iranian ministry statement, which was carried by state media, said that Iranian forces are cooperating with, quote, noble Kurds to thwart the Israeli-American plan to attack Iranian soil. Additionally, the IRGC claimed to have struck several Kurdish bases in Iraq. Okay. And Turkey's following the situation. And yeah. And here we get to where things get messy. Aziz Ahmad, deputy chief of staff to the prime minister of Kurdistan, called the claims patently false. And the claims he's talking about are claims that Iraqi Kurds participated in the invasion. Okay. And he put a post on Twitter where he said on X that not a single Iraqi has crossed the border. Iran's IRGC also denied the reports, stating that they're aimed at undermining security and stability in Iran. An official from the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan also dismissed the report. Okay, so we have some Iranian Kurdish group is also saying there was no invasion. The Iraqi Kurds are saying we got nothing to do with this. We have one of the top Iraqi Kurdish leaders talking to the Iranian foreign minister. And meanwhile, at the same time, we have an IRGC base, meaning an Iranian regime base, was destroyed in an airstrike in Iran's Kurdistan province. And where was it destroyed? It says huge columns of smoke rose over the city of Baneh this morning after a base belonging to the IRGC was destroyed. Where's Baneh? So here's Baneh right here. And Baneh is right by the border. This black line is the border between Iran and Iraq. Here's Erbil. That's the airport that was bombed by the Iranians on the first day of the war. They obviously wanted to take it away from use by the Kurdish forces in the area. And in the video I made yesterday, I pointed out that Sardasht, which also had an Iranian base, an IRGC base, was attacked a day before by the Israelis and Americans. And there was a prison breakout of Kurdish prisoners from an Iranian prison in Mahabad also. Okay, so Baneh is another border town. So you see that there's airstrikes being carried out here to degrade the Iranian forces along the border to allow for this Kurdish invasion. And Trump has said that he's fine with it, right? Look, what did Trump say here? Trump backs wonderful Kurdish incursion into Iran if they want to do that. President Trump endorsed reported plans by Kurdish groups to launch an incursion into Iran in the hopes of fomenting a broader popular uprising against the Tehran regime and potentially earning their own state. Quote, I think it's wonderful if they want to do that, Trump told Reuters in a Thursday interview. And, so Trump being behind this can get a little bit messy, okay? And this is, I'm finally going to explain what's going on. U.S. President Donald Trump offered extensive U.S. air cover and other forms of support for Iranian Kurdish opposition groups this week, the Washington Post reports. Okay, it says that he spoke to the leaders, and it says here like this: the American request to the Iraqi Kurds, listen carefully, the American request to the Iraqi Kurds is to open the way and not obstruct the Iranian Kurds inside Iraq, says senior Patriotic Union of Kurdistan official. while also providing logistical support. The PUK, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, is one of the two major Iraqi Kurdish parties and is generally seen as closer to Iran and more distant from Israel than its rival, the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP. The senior official says that Trump was clear in his Sunday conversation with Bafel Talabani, leader of the PUK. Those are the guys who are closer to Iran. He told us the Kurds must choose a side in this battle, either with America and Israel or with Iran. Trump also called the KDP head, Barzani. He offered a similar message to them. Very nice. Iranian and Iraqi Kurds are in a difficult situation. The U.S. has backed Kurds in Iraq and Syria, but has also repeatedly prioritized the interests of more powerful state adversaries of the Kurds, like in Syria, right, where the Americans backed the Ashara regime and the Turkish agenda and kind of threw the Kurds under the bus. So the Americans have betrayed the Kurds a few times. Iraq's Kurds have reached an uneasy modus vivendi with Iran based on the sides not backing attacks on the other. Okay, so that's what I was talking about before. The Iraqi Kurds kind of cooperate with the Iranians. They don't want problems with the Shiites in Iraq and the Iranian-backed militias that are there. They want it to be quiet. They don't want those attacks happening. They're denying involvement in this. You have a leader of the Iraqi Kurds reaching out to the Iranian foreign minister saying, we're going to work together. And then meanwhile, you have Trump leaning on them saying, look, buddy, you got to pick a side. You can't be cooperating with the Iranians here. I need you to at least not stand in the way of the Iranian Kurds who are going to be launching attacks on Iran from Iraqi territory. Okay? We are in a very delicate position, says the senior PUK official. If this ground offensive fails, we do not know what Iran's reaction against the Kurdistan region of Iraq would be. At the same time, we cannot simply reject Trump's request, especially when he personally calls and asks for it. You see the tight spot that they're in. And the bottom line is there's a lot of different groups here. Look at this. Regional officials in Washington also commented on Kurdish groups. Turkey said it was closely monitoring the activities of the Kurdistan Free Life Party and Iranian Kurdish opposition groups linked to the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Okay, there are a lot of different Kurdish groups. So let me pull back the camera a little bit and kind of sum this up, okay? Let's ask a very basic question, 30,000-foot view. Let's back up. Why don't the Kurds have autonomy? There's 35 million Kurds, and they're all in one pretty much contiguous region. About half of the Kurds in the world, maybe a little less, are in Turkey. And that's a problem. They're viewed as a hostile minority. They also want their independence. Erdogan fears them. There have been periods of time in Turkey where it basically, he tries to make it illegal to be Kurd. Like you're not allowed to speak publicly in Kurdish. There's all kinds of crazy things that have happened in Turkey to the Kurds. But the Kurds are in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. That's where they're spread. And they have this autonomous region in Iraq. They have a sort of autonomous area in Syria, and that's what's been under attack by the Ashara regime over the last year or so. And then you have these Iranian Kurds who very much identify as Iranian, but want to have their own. They want to have their own autonomous area within Iran, and they want to pick at the carcass of the Iranian regime or help bring it down. And part of the problem with the Kurds, as you see just from what I've read to you, is that there's so many different groups, they can't get along with each other. And if you go all the way back to the fall of the Ottoman Empire, when this whole region was being carved up, and all these countries were being created, you see, before 1920, before the end of the First World War, before the fall of the Ottoman Empire, there was no such thing as Lebanon as a country. There was no such thing as Syria. There was no such thing as Jordan. I just got a notification of a possible incoming missile. So let's see if we can finish the video before the air raid siren goes. So none of these countries existed. It was all just one big area that was just the Ottoman Empire. And there were tribes and different, different groups that lived in different areas, but it was just one big swath that was just owned by the Turks. It was that way for centuries. And then the Ottoman Empire falls, and these British and French diplomats with some Americans involved put maps on a table and they carve it up and they take control of different areas and they divide it up and create different kingdoms and countries. So you have, suddenly you have a Saudi Arabia and a Jordan and an Iraq and a Syria and a Lebanon, right? You have all these different areas. Okay. Why didn't the Kurds get an independent Kurdistan at the time? Well, the answer is they couldn't get their act together. I mean, there's a few reasons why they didn't, but the main reason is, if you go back into the history books, is that there was no one really representing the Kurds because there were so many different Kurdish groups and they couldn't get along with each other. And the Western diplomats basically said, "The heck with you guys, you can't get your act together," and they basically cut them out of the deal. And the Kurds are still having that same problem today. They can't get along with each other. And to make matters worse, most Iranian people don't want the Kurds to carve out a piece of Iran and go independent. So if the Kurds are being armed by the Americans and the Israelis and being encouraged to come in and topple the Iranian regime, that actually is something that most Iranian people, those who want the regime to fall, are very much against. They don't want the fall of the regime to devolve into a type of civil war. They want something stable and unified, even if it means that the transition takes longer. They don't want this Kurdish incursion, and because the Kurdish are they got weapons and they're going to come in and they're going to be fighting. That's not what most Iranian people want. So this is going to get really messy really fast. But that's what's going on right now with the Kurds in northwest Iran. It seems that some of them have crossed the border. Everything points to the fact that Trump is backing them somewhat publicly, saying, "Oh, it's wonderful if they want to do that." But also we get these reports that he's spoken to these people. He's had conversations with them. He's told the Iraqi Kurds to not stand in the way of the Iranian Kurds, and the Iranian Kurds are ready to fight. Is it too early to try to have them go in and fight and bring down the regime? Are they going to get slaughtered by the IRGC? It remains to be seen. But that's the lay of the land right now. As confusing as it is, that's the lay of the land with the situation of the Kurds in this war. Thanks for watching. Thanks for promoting the channel. Thanks for telling everyone about it. I'm so grateful to all of you for helping this channel become a success. And of course, please check out all the great content we're putting up at the Israel 365 News YouTube channel. We've been putting up some very important videos the last couple of days about some of the broader implications of this war in Iran. So go check that out. Israel 365 News on YouTube. God bless.